So hi there everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Suze, I'll be your compere today. I'm the commercial manager here at WhisperClaims. It's lovely to see so many familiar names popping up, and a warm welcome to everyone, as well as the delegates and attendees who've not met us before. If you don't already know who we are, WhisperClaims is a cloud-based platform that is disrupting and redefining the R&D tax credit market by empowering accountants to deliver high-quality advisory services. Our technology is currently being used by over 300 accountants across the UK to simplify a complex process using a structured and scalable framework, enabling users to create R&D reports quickly and easily. It's fair to say that we are on a mission to help raise standards within the sector, so you will frequently hear us talking about eligibility in certain sectors, how to define it, and what is not eligible, along with guidance on handling less clear aspects of the scheme when faced with things like COVID-related funding, how to apply the rules, that sort of thing. Anyway, enough about us, let's get on to the exciting bits. So firstly, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just to give you some pointers in terms of setup, if you would like to chat to the other attendees, please open up your chat box and ensure that the visibility is switched to panelists and attendees. Obviously, if you just want to talk to us directly, then just keep it at panelists. If you have any questions to ask during the webinar, it would be greatly appreciated if you could use the Q&A section. If you want to ask any questions anonymously, then toggle your send anonymously toggle on beforehand, and also please remember that you can upvote and comment on other attendees' questions in the Q&A, which will push questions up to higher up the list. So if there's more priority ones, then we can judge which ones to answer first if we get a flurry in. Hope that's all okay for everyone. Okay, so without further ado, we have three panelists with us today. Just to set the scene a bit, you have the tools you need to deliver an R&D claim. You may have some in-house expertise, or you may already be deploying software and possibly one or two clients, but what about the challenge of winning new business? How will you go about finding new clients and developing a new and profitable revenue stream whilst continuing to deliver the services that you're already offering? So delighted to introduce our three panelists today. We have Phil Sayers, the founder of Proten Sales Development Limited. We also have Mike Crook, MD at PracticeWeb, and our very own Mike Dean, Managing Director of WhisperClaims, to provide you with some fantastic insights, hints and tips on how to build a client pipeline for R&D tax services. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Suze. Thank you. So the idea here was to do a little intro on WhisperClaims, but Suze did such a great job in her intro to give you a flavour of our business that what I thought I'd do is just talk about a couple of key stats about our business that people might be interested in. I've just looked these up immediately before we got onto the webinar. So we were founded in 2018. Suze said we're a software company focused on the R&D tax claims market. Like I say, a couple of key stats. As of Friday last week, we'd gone through just over 1,070 claims going through our platform, representing £108 million worth of eligible spend. So if you think about it, that's 108 million of eligible identified by our users on behalf of their clients, and that amounts to about £25 million worth of tax benefit for our users' clients, which is an amazing stat. But in addition to that, on Friday, just to kind of give you a flavour for the throughput on the platform, we had 800K's worth of eligible spend go through just in one day. So a great indication of where we've got to in the last 2 years or so. So that's enough about our business. Mike, do you want to say something about PracticeWeb?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I'm the Managing Director of PracticeWeb, and if you're not familiar with us, we are a digital marketing agency who work exclusively with accounting firms to help them grow through marketing. And I suppose if we are going along the stats piece that Mike kicked off, there's two key stats that we talk about in the market, which is firms who work with us over a 5-month period see either a 20% increase in traffic to their website, and also a 30% increase in leads coming into their firm when they work with us over a 5-month period. So we're all very much about lead generation and helping to build a pipeline, which is probably quite a nice segue into what Phil does once you've done your marketing. What do you need to do with it? So yeah, cue Phil. Oh, you're on mute, Phil.
Schoolboy error. Sorry, Mike. Yeah, thanks for the segue, Mike. Yeah, I think Mike's involvement is in helping accounting firms get more visibility and generate more incoming inquiries, really, and educating their prospect base. I guess where I fit is helping accountants become more effective at having truly valuable conversations with prospects and existing clients and uncovering new opportunities for additional services. So I work with lots of accountants as well as other small businesses, providing sort of sales training courses, sales coaching, and also general business coaching support services as well.
Brilliant. Suze, do you want to put the next slide up? Good stuff. So the conversation we're about to get into is actually largely based on content from 3 ebooks from each of the 3 partners involved in this today. So one from PracticeWeb, one from ourselves, and one from Proten. The links to all of those should be in the chat box already. So if, as we're chatting today, if you can those ebooks and get even more information, should all be there to hand. So thanks for that, Suze. Do you want to put the next one up? Brilliant. So getting into the meat and bones of what we're talking about, I thought it'd be useful just to kick off by looking at some stats around the R&D tax market and just kind of set the scene a little bit. These 2 graphs are both taken from the latest HMRC report on the scheme, which came out in September last year. The graph on the left is showing the total throughput of the scheme, if you like, the volume of claims going through the scheme. The key thing I wanted to point out about that are the green bars in those graphs, which represent the SME scheme. And you'll see that kind of explosive growth since 2013-14. That amounts to, I think it's something like 15% year-on-year growth. Actually, it's between 15 and 20% year-on-year growth just in the SME scheme itself. So that kind of gives you a flavour of this sort of rise in awareness about the scheme and the benefits it represents in that time frame. Now, the graph on the right is showing the number of new applicants year on year. So you'll see from that in the last reported year, there was about 14,000 or so new applications. There's a sort of underlying stat about all of this, that 72% of all claims through the scheme have less than 50K's worth of eligible spend. So that's, in the industry as a whole, will be deemed as a small claim. So a few things just to mention with that. Huge increase in the number of SME claims. Inevitably, given that 72% stat I just mentioned, the majority of those claims are going to be small. So the implication is that as accountants and consultants operating in this market, that's the end of the market that you're likely to get most exposed to. And interestingly, it's the part of the market that is least well served by the bigger accountancy firms and the bigger R&D specialist consultants, all of whom will be setting fee thresholds below which they'll walk away from work. And it's kind of interesting to see that, the bit that they're walking away from in volume terms is actually the biggest part of the market. So just as we're going through the rest of the conversation, kind of interesting just to have those stats in mind. So thanks for that, Suze. Brilliant. So without further ado, sort of straight into the questions around this. So we'll kick off, Mike, with a question for you. What would you say are the key challenges that accountants are facing in launching new services, not just R&D, but in general? What are the challenges they face?
Good question. So clients typically come to us or have 3 problems when they come to us. One is, in the first instance, they don't know how to package that service up, and by that I mean how it fits into their overall offering, what the service should include within it. And then you get pricing, so not just how to price it, but also not just how to price it from a market perspective and what the market expects to pay for that service, but also how profitable it is and pricing it in that way. And then also taking it to market. So once you've worked out how to package it up and price it, how do you go about getting it out, being visible in market and promoting it to attract the right type of clients? So those are the main 3 areas really that people come to us for support on.
Okay, well, we'll end up talking about those 3 things in a bit more detail in a minute. prior to all of that, what are the sort of key things to think about in looking out at the market and trying to figure, you know, if I'm going to be packaging and positioning a service out there, who am I going to address it to? So, what are your tips around things like market research and understanding the market in general?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mike, because it is the one area that a lot of businesses tend to skip. I think if businesses end up excited about a new potential service or an offering, and they may have already had it on good authority from sort of client conversations, but then they race forward to try and package it up and then get it out to market. And what they fail to do is really research the market and do the foundations in the first place. So it's trying to work out what the customer cares about in that service, what the problems are to solve, and what we're looking for, especially from a marketing perspective, is what's that hook. You don't want to assume that you know it all. You aren't the target client at the end of the day, so you'll have a good understanding because you'll speak to your clients, but you wouldn't have done the specific research around this service to understand those challenges and issues that relate to that ideal client. And I guess in terms of getting that information, yes, I'd recommend doing 3 types of research, I suppose. You've got desk research, which then helps you sort of, it's fairly inexpensive. You've got Google at your fingertips, you can start searching away, looking at competitors, but also looking at social media activity and what's already out there that you can glean and understand about the market and these potential customers. Then you've got customer interviews, which is a really strong way of meeting one-to-one. It's more targeted. You can ask specific questions and you can start to see patterns in people's answers to work out what those kind of hooks are, those challenges are that are most pressing. And then the final one is surveying, which you then end up getting a wider opinion from, 150, 250 people in that target market on what perhaps your hypotheses are. You can test those. You can also test your assumptions, but you can also test, if you've done your desk research and your interviews, get a wider view on those opinions.
I suppose just thinking about what you've said there in the context of R&D, targeting particular segments might work well. So thinking about market segments where you might expect there to be R&D going on is one thing. But I suppose you've also got to think about softer things too. So we've seen in the last 12 months, certainly in the last 12 months, an uptick in the number of claims going through the platform, I think, as a result of COVID. So, a hunger for more investment, if you like, into a business and trying to capture that capital that a claim might represent. So actually, that's quite a subtle thing, isn't it? You might be looking at sectors that have been harder hit by the pandemic and seeing that as a way in, actually looking for mechanisms to help them out with capital requirements as much as looking at them from a segment perspective.
Yeah. How you segment your customer, or if it's launching a new service, you've got to work out who those ideal clients are and what you want, really, don't you? So we help clients define personas, or client avatars is another word for it, I guess. But if you can understand who they are, it's a great way then to help you package and price and promote it all around them. And if you're not familiar with personas, I guess it's essentially how you group those customers. And what we say to clients are typically 3 personas. You could go to 5 if you want, but any more is certainly going to be overwhelming. But the aim there is, like you said there, Mike, the softer side is also understanding how they make buying decisions, what their hopes and fears are, and their challenges that they have. And many times it's not just the business problems and challenges. You're dealing with SMEs and business owners who may have personal challenges, issues, and goals. You need to understand those as well, and what's motivating them to, again, go back into what I said a minute ago, those hooks, to sort of hook them in from a marketing perspective. And those challenges are specific to help you then shape your service and your proposition as well, not just how you're going to market it, but if you define those personas, you're going to know, you're going to be better informed to create a service that is relevant to those target clients.
Well, it's probably worth me just mentioning that we do tend to get a lot of questions about eligibility, so eligibility for the R&D scheme. And we run quite a few webinars, and we push out a lot of content around that issue of eligibility. And we've got a webinar coming up in March that's precisely about that. So anyone who's interested in that, please look out for that. So just keeping going, Mike, in terms of positioning the service, so once you've decided who it is that you're going to approach, What are the sort of tools that we should be thinking about using in reaching out to the market?
When it comes to reaching out to prospects as well as clients, because there's a new service, you want to reach clients as well and let them know about it. You kind of need to work out where they hang out and how they like to engage. So it might be in different areas that you're currently in and what channels they're using. Certainly to find services, but also to answer specific problems and challenges. And if you take a blended approach to marketing, those things are, I guess, social media, which is a great way to then get engagement, excuse me. Also to show your personality, you've got your corporate brand, you've got your personal brand, you can start demonstrating your expertise through that. Search engine optimization, you can't really ignore being in search these days. You need to be visible and up there. When we look at our client statistics across all of our client websites that we work with, 60% of their traffic comes from social search. So it's not one to be ignored. To be honest, it's a big driver of traffic. Paid advertising also has its place. Can be quite expensive at times, but it certainly does have its place in marketing. Things like blogging and videos are a great way, again, to demonstrate your expertise, and it can be used for social media. It can boost your search engine optimization as well. And then something that we work hard with clients on is having a website that's all focused around lead generation. It's not much point in having a website that's brochure led. It's got to drive traffic, and it's got to drive leads and inquiries into the business, so you can start to sell and get Q Phil's work really in helping them to close that business. But our job is very much about getting traffic and getting leads and inquiries into the firm.
And I suppose it reinforces the point you just made about personas as well, that that investment in tools should be determined by properly understanding those personas, and as you say, understanding where people hang out, so you're best equipped to reach out to them.
Yeah, you can't build a website or a marketing strategy without really understanding who those clients are, what makes them tick, so that you can communicate to them in the right way and attract them to.
Yeah, I must admit, in our WhisperClaims journey, that was a sort of significant moment for us when we realised who our sweet spot customer was.
Yeah.
That then fueled the whole process of how to invest in order to reach them effectively.
But the interesting thing there, Mike, is what you started out with isn't what you've refined now.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
and that's what we do with our own customer targets, and that's what we work with clients with. 12 months down the line, you'll have learned a heck of a lot more, and you'll be able to refine them and really understand them more. And you just do that every year. You just keep learning and evolving and really refining them and get better at it.
Yeah. It's not a kind of one-shot activity, this, is it? You've got to keep on top of it. It's probably fair to say as well that the majority of people who are on this call, who will be owners of accountancy firms, won't have a dedicated resource for this. So it is important to kind of make sure that you've got the right resources lined up and dedicate some time to keep on top of it, one way or another. Okay, so back to what you said earlier about the three key areas. You talked about packaging, pricing, and then essentially the campaigns. So back to packaging, how would you go about packaging a service, given the kind of the broad portfolio of services that accountants tend to be offering?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so how would I go about doing it? I think the great thing about packaging it up is whatever you're selling or whatever service it is, your job is to make it easy to buy. You're kind of trying to remove the ambiguity and confusion around the sales process and make it incredibly easy for them to choose you over your competitors. And if you've done your research and you understand the customer, you can build it around those challenges and don't make them think about it. But we go through a process that says things like, is it easy to digest? Is that service really easy to digest from the outset? Is it specific? Is it clear on what they're going to get? Is it simple language, which is also really, really key? Accounting, just like marketing, is really bad for jargon and acronyms and all the rest of it. Not everybody knows those, unfortunately. So again, make it super simple. And again, going back to that, you don't have all the answers. Don't assume that the client knows what it all is about, because you're going to know more than they do. So it's trying to boil it down in a way that, again, meets their needs and challenges and issues and answers those specific questions. But it is fairly simple. And I suppose the final point on that, Mike, is also knowing how it fits into your overall business. So is it an add-on to what you're trying to sell in the first place, or is it a new core service? R&D, does it enable you specifically to create a new business around it? because it might not fit. I mean, we've helped firms who want to launch, who for years and years have spent in the SME space, and then they want to start going after larger corporate businesses. Well, those two don't fit together, so therefore we need to create two separate brands. But it's thinking strategically about, is it an add-on, core service, new business, and how that work.
That makes perfect sense. So then shifting to pricing. So you know, we get lots of questions about the market pricing for R&D services, but in general, how should you go about kind of trying to figure out how to position your price?
It's $1 million question, isn't it? I suppose it depends on, from my view, it depends on how you position the service, what that service is, and then I suppose it goes back to the research. How does the market want to pay for it in the first place? And then is it profitable? And there's a number of, you know, there's well documented out there on how to price services, I guess, but a few of them are things like value-based pricing. So again, you know, how the market perceives that value. You can bundle pricing, which is, you know, grouping services together. Often if you group those services together, you might apply a discount to it because they're buying them in a bundle. You then got subscriptions, monthly or annual reoccurring, great for businesses because then it's a little bit more, well, you know, that's how I'm sure your model probably works and many tech vendors work. And then you got pay as you go. So there's lots of different ways to do that, but you really want to understand how the market prefers to buy that service. And I should imagine from your perspective, Mike, you've got some good insight around, you know, from an R&D perspective, how people are, you know, buying those services.
Yeah, it's a hugely competitive market, as everyone who's on this call will know. And the sort of traditional way of pricing an R&D tech service is on a contingent success fee basis. And probably even as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, there were still 30% plus prices out there. So that's 30% or more of the tax benefit that's realised by the client. There's been lots of pressure on that over the years, and probably in contingent fee terms, we see an average probably more in the bounds of 15 to 20% range. We do still hear about people getting away with a 30% contingent fee, but it's few and far between these days. The big thing we've seen, I guess, is to a certain extent fueled by our tech, is a shift towards fixed fees. Of course, using technology, you're able to understand more the resource implications of putting a claim together. You're able to do it within more of a fixed cost, which is then leading to fixed fees. And we're seeing anywhere between sort of £2,000, £3,000 as a fixed fee for a claim. Inevitably, the average is somewhere in between those two, about 2.5K. And that's pretty game changing in terms of a market that, as I say, is for a long time has seen these 30% plus contingent fees. And one of the things we're proud of is that we're helping people to make that move and to disrupt the market. So in terms of,
sorry to interrupt you there, Mike. We're running a bit short of time.
We're getting a bit tight.
Yeah.
Just a quick word then,
yeah.
Mike, just on marketing campaigns in general. So, you know, we often hear people saying, "So I'm running a campaign." What does that mean? I guess it's wrapping up all of the things you've talked about.
No, fair enough. I'll make it quick. So in terms of a marketing campaign, well, essentially it's taking a topic or theme and building content around it to demonstrate your expertise to attract the right type of prospect, and then engage them, and ultimately, you know, hopefully they become a client. So when it comes to a topic or a theme, I guess I should just focusing in on one overall theme. It could be an overall theme for a month. It could be an overall theme for a quarter. Just depends on your business and marketing goals. But within that theme, you can answer challenges and issues, you know, that you need to answer. And going back to the points that I made earlier about your marketing, could be things like, you know, creating ebooks, guides, how-tos. You create a load of videos, write blogs, do social posts and engagement and paid advertising. And whilst the campaign should be time-bound, really what you want is something that's perennial problems that continue to happen, so that you can continue to generate a steady flow of interest and leads around those issues and challenges, so you can build up a pipeline over the year of what you're looking for.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Mike. I noticed that the Q&A section's a bit quiet, so do feel free to throw questions into the Q&A as we're going, everybody. Phil, I noticed from some of your content on LinkedIn recently, you've been talking about the sales challenge for accountants, and now as a group, they're often, which actually I guess is true of the population as a whole, but accountants are particularly kind of reticent when it comes to selling.
I think that's true, Mike, but I wouldn't see it as a criticism. I mean, I think in many cases it's a function of the way that accountants are trained. So, you know, if you think about accountancy as a highly technical profession, you're taught to look for right and wrong answers. You know, either a trial balance balances or it doesn't. And you're looking for yes, no answers. And part of the issue with selling is that there aren't necessarily yes or no answers. There are just answers that are right for a particular customer at a particular time. And I think the other thing that also gives selling a bit of a bad reputation, particularly with the accountancy profession, is I would guarantee that everybody on this webinar today, at some point or other, has been approached by a really pushy salesperson whose sole interest is flogging their particular bit of technology or whatever it is they're selling, without really trying to understand how relevant it is to you and your business, and whether or not it's actually going to help you solve any problems you're facing. And for me, selling is not pitching. Selling is not trying to sort of force a product or service down a client's throat. Selling is trying to find ways that you can help them overcome whatever challenges they're facing. And Mike made a really valid point earlier on, where for many small businesses, the business itself really is a means to an end. It's a means of helping the business owner achieve some sort of personal goal, whether that's earnings, whether it's saving for retirement, whether it's just, and particularly relevant right now, getting a better work-life balance. So if you're starting to explore how the business is impacting on their personal life, there may actually be other angles that you can find to help them and ultimately create and deliver far greater value.
It's interesting just listening to that. Makes me feel old, actually. If I go back 30 years, the sales training that I did, which was in the States 30 years ago, was done sort of in isolation. So, you know, all of the techniques that Mike's just talked about didn't exist in those days, and selling was a kind of foot in the door trade. And it's almost the antithesis in a way of what it is today, you know, that actually establishing the customer's needs, understanding who the customer is, and reaching out to them with all the tools that Mike mentioned there has to be a precursor to that conversation. You want to be talking to people who are already engaged and interested.
Absolutely. I have the same age issue as you, Mike. So when I started in my career, sales and marketing were entirely separate functions. The marketing team were there to run trade shows, do advertising, hopefully generate the odd lead or two. But the sales role was huge amounts of cold calling, cold emailing, just trying to find opportunities to talk about your product or service. Nowadays, the two disciplines hugely overlap. And they have to be completely aligned, so that the messaging that you give to clients in a face-to-face environment has to be exactly the same as the messaging you're providing through your marketing campaigns. And certainly within the accountancy profession, the vast majority of sales conversations that you're going to have with clients will be off the back of and created by the marketing campaigns that you've been running. And the other big difference between now and when I started is that customers buy in a very different way now. So before a client picks up a phone to call you or sends you an email, they'll have done their own research. They'll have Googled local accountants in their area, and they've probably come across umpteen websites that all look pretty much the same. They all say the same things. They all offer the same services. And the risk is, from a marketing perspective, if that's the way you come across, then the only thing that will differentiate you over the rest is your price. And that's a slippery slope, because the client will then just look for the cheapest possible service. And where the sales techniques come into is trying to uncover the other areas where you can provide incremental value, which then justifies a higher service as the basis, a higher price, a higher fee as the basis of delivering more services and greater value services.
So let's assume on the back of that then that we've implemented Mike's tips there, and we've got inquiries coming in through the door. What are your tips around that kind of first point of engagement with a new opportunity? Where would you start?
It's all about questions, Mike. Lots and lots of questions. So the thing not to do is to go into a sales pitch. because at that stage, you don't know what the client wants. Now, they may come to you with a shopping list of things they know they want. And the classic ones will be things like year-end accounts, tax returns, bookkeeping, VAT returns, and so on, or payroll. But there may be loads of other things that actually they need, but they just don't realize it, either because they've never thought about it or because they're not aware of that this thing exists. And R&D tax claims is a perfect example for this. Many, many small businesses just don't realize that there's an opportunity for them to get in some cases, a really substantial tax credit back from HMRC. But if they don't know about it, then they're never going to ask you about it. So the starting point for any conversation with a prospect or even with an existing client is an open-ended conversation, asking lots of really open-ended questions, both about what's going on in their business, but also what's going on in their personal life, as Mike said earlier on. And that link between the business and their personal life is crucially important, because people buy on two levels. They buy on a practical level. So does this service deliver what I need it to do? But they also buy on an emotional level. And that's an emotional connection that they'll build with you as their accountant. But it's also an emotional decision based on how what you do for them is going to make them feel. So if you're able to help them free up time to have that big family holiday they've been promising their partner for the last 3 years but never managed to find the time to take, then that's a huge, huge win. There's no financial benefit to it, but at an emotional level, it's incredibly powerful. So the starting point absolutely is asking lots of questions, getting the client or the prospect to open up about what's going on in their world, because that's where you're going to be able to provide the value.
I was going to ask you a question about qualifying prospects, but to a certain extent, I think you've kind of answered it in the sense that if you don't go through that questioning phase, you're actually not going to be able to establish whether this person is wasting your time or if it's a real prospect.
Absolutely, and what you will find is once you get the prospect to open up about what's happening in their business and in their personal world, and let's face it, most business owners love talking about their business. They're really proud of it. It's their baby. And so they want to talk about it, and they'll talk about what's going well, but they'll also talk about perhaps what's not going so well. And you can learn questioning techniques to help encourage the prospect to open up. The other thing to bear in mind is as well, and again, this goes back to Mike's point earlier on about defining who your target market is. What are the characteristics of your prime target client? If you start to then think about what are the typical issues that many of your clients may be facing, you can start to develop a standard list of questions that you can drop into these conversations. And they won't come across as being, a tick box of questions that you're running through. They'll come across as being quite conversational. But you'll suddenly start to demonstrate to the prospect that you really understand the world that they're living in and the world they're operating in. And as you start to explore what those challenges are, that's the point at which you're able to go back and talk about how you can help them address them. And so what you shouldn't do is sit there for half an hour just reeling off a sales pitch of all the services that you offer, because until you understand what's going on in the prospect's world, you don't know how many of those services are actually directly relevant or of interest to them.
It's that old sales adage, isn't it, that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth? Use them in proportion.
Absolutely. So somebody put a post on LinkedIn this morning, and that one cropped up, and I describe it as an oldie but goodie, and it's as true today as it was when I first heard it X years ago.
Yeah. I shouldn't have put a time frame on it when I said that earlier, should I? But anyway, so in terms of getting to close, then. So everybody's always kind of, I say everybody, most people have this discomfort about how do I get to a point where somebody's committed to order something from me, and I guess that's just a continuation of what you've just said there. In terms of you taking them on a journey, you're almost getting them to admit that they need to buy by taking them through the process you've just described.
You are. I mean, this is where the real sort of soft skills start to come into play, because as you're having the conversations, if you phrase your questions in a way that it encourages the prospect to say yes to each little individual step as you're working through this discussion, when it comes to actually asking them to commit to come on board, emotionally, it's much easier for them to say yes again, because they've got used to saying it already. But there are also softer ways of closing as well. So, you can suggest to say, well, we've identified 5 or 6 ways that we think we can help you. But the key thing is to position the value of what you're going to deliver to them. So you don't want to come across with something to say, well, yes, we can do your annual accounts and your bookkeeping and your payroll, and the fee is going to be X. It's going to be, well, if we do your annual accounts and your payroll and your bookkeeping, we've already worked out that it's going to save you, let's say, 3 hours of time a week. And you've already said that those 3 hours you could now use going to sell to more customers and increase your revenue. Our fee for this service is going to be X. And of course, the fee is significantly less than the value of the new business they could generate with all of this extra free time. So it's positioning the value of what you're delivering first before you then position your fee. And there are a number of other sort of more specific closing techniques you can use that I cover on my sort of sales skills workshops. But fundamentally, if you lead the prospect down this journey in a subtle and gentle way, getting them to the point where they've suddenly realized there is actually a huge amount of value they're going to get from you, not just the pure compliance services, not just overcoming any fears of getting a brown envelope from HMRC, then they're much more likely to want to engage with you.
Yeah, brilliant.
Sorry, Mike, sorry to interrupt you. We've got just under, 8 or 9 minutes to 8 minutes or so.
Yeah, no problem, Suze. I think I could sit here and talk about this topic forever. I love this kind of this whole sales and marketing journey for any business, not just ours. That's fantastic, guys. Thanks for giving us that overview. I noticed, Suze, there were questions coming in and out, some of which Mark's has answered. So were we actually answering them as we went there?
Mike's done a great job of responding directly to a couple of folk. We've got one sitting there that's live. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, let's have a look.
So this one's from Paul Harmer. Thank you, Paul. He said, we have a high percentage of clients who recommend our services to others. What is the best way to maximise this within the R&D service we provide?
So I guess that's a question really about maximising the number of referrals. So encouraging people to refer more business in. Phil, any tips on that?
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for referrals. If you're doing a good job for your clients and they recognize that you're doing a good job, genuinely, don't be afraid to say, do you know of anybody else who you think we might be able to help in a similar way? Or, have you spoken to anybody else recently who you know is seeing the same sort of challenges that you are? So don't be afraid to ask for them. And if they offer to make referrals for you, ask them to do a personal introduction. So get them to send an email to their contact that CCs you. Because then it opens up the conversation with this second prospect far more easily than you calling them cold and saying, well, Mike suggested I should give you a call. Because if I'm brutally honest, I've seen salespeople try that in the past and said, oh, Joe Bloggs suggested I should give you a call. And it unless it's really genuine, it can actually backfire quite drastically. So get your existing clients to make personal introductions for you. You'll soon see how genuine they are as to whether or not they actually go ahead and do it.
The good news for Paul there is that clearly that's happening anyway, kind of by accident. So if he starts asking, then hopefully the floodgates should open. Certainly a good sign.
Absolutely. The other thing I have seen some accountants do, in some cases they'll offer some sort of incentive for referrals, and I wouldn't do it on a sort of finder's fee basis. Make it a little bit more personal. Maybe it's a box of chocolates or some sort of small but emotionally high value gift as a thank you for anybody who does make referrals for you.
Excellent, good stuff. Suze, is it worth some of those questions that have been asked that Mike's answered? Would it be worth just going through a couple of those for the benefit of the wider audience?
So we had Dennis has asked, he's actually got 2 questions. So Mike, will I just read them both out and then you can address them in a quick roundup? So the first one being, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out an R&D service solely and the accountancy services on the side? He has a specific niche. What marketing advice, either organic or paid, would you give to him with limited paid marketing budgets? And he's also asked about in terms of making your price visible. So is it good to make your price visible for R&D in the website or on a brochure, or mention the price somewhere, or is it just best to keep that for the phone call or once you've had a chance to talk to the prospects?
Yeah, so my response, sorry, it gave me something to do whilst Phil was talking, so I thought I would answer, so I do apologise. So yeah, my answer, the first one, which was about limited budget, I guess, paid media. If you've got a limited budget, you want to be scrutinising where you're spending it and if it's working for the best for you. And my response really was let the data tell you. So, you know, try paid media, see what happens. It doesn't just have to be pay-per-click in Google. It could be social media paid advertising as well. See what's working and if it's generating the inquiries, and then test other forms as well. So it could be search engine optimization. You start to put your money and energy and effort in. Okay, it could take, you know, 4, 5, 6 months to actually get some serious traction if you're from a standing start. But it's certainly worth the investment. Pay-per-click, well, you'll pay for being right at the top straight from the bat, but as soon as you stop paying for it, you disappear. Whereas SEO, yes, it's an ongoing game, but you are there without needing to continually pay for being visible. But you should just test whatever you do with a smaller budget. You just got to be really key on the statistics. And then the other question, which was about should you put pricing on? I gave a very short answer to this, but I think it's probably can be a little bit more complicated. I think yes, because it's going to, in one way, it's going to stop the sort of window shoppers, and you know, if you qualify those prospects in or out pretty quickly, they're going to ask for price at some point in the journey. But my point on that one really was that make sure you've got a strong value proposition, because otherwise it will just be based on price. If you've just got a very thin content, not a lot explaining it, and just a price. Especially if it's a high price, people are just going to go, I don't see the value in that. So it's explaining the value, what they're getting for that price. And again, goes back to my other point, test it, put it on there, see what happens, take it off, see what happens. And that's very much marketing really. And I don't know, Phil, you've probably got a view on that too.
I would agree wholeheartedly, Mike. I mean, I think the key thing with pricing is pricing has to be put in the context of the value that you're delivering. And the best way of proving the value you can deliver is with client testimonials. Yeah. So if you can talk about specific cases where, you know, you've done an R&D tax claim for client A and you've saved them, you know, or you've generated a tax credit, let's say £50,000, and your fee was 5, then even though, you know, they may see the 5 grand as being a relatively high fee in the context of a 50 grand claim that they wouldn't otherwise have got, then it becomes a no-brainer. So you use your clients to help sell for you. If they're happy, you know, they're the best possible, it's the best possible source of marketing content.
Suze, give them oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Suze.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I've got you.
Sorry, I was going to say we're running a wee bit short of time, and we want to make sure that we can tell everyone about our exciting news. So should we move on to
yeah, so just reminding everybody that any questions we haven't answered, we'll be doing that in the at the roundup email we send out later on this week.
Yeah, thanks, Mike and Phil, for your answers to those questions already, though. Okay, so before we wrap up, thank you so much for your patience and your time, and I hope you've enjoyed the last sort of 45 minutes or so. And we've got some really exciting news to announce. Within the next few days, we're going to be officially launching our WhisperClaims Masterclass Programme 2021. This is a competition, and you are the first people to hear about it, so you're very lucky. The WhisperClaims team are dedicated to providing our users best possible R&D tax advice from our in-app sort of technical support, our friendly team of experts, and also our range of content and guides. But we don't want to just stop there. As we've been discussing today, we understand the challenges faced within the sector when it comes to building client pipelines. So alongside our in-house capability, we've built a unique package of support for the most ambitious firms in the UK. 5 lucky winners will receive a series of 5 masterclasses delivered by WhisperClaims and our partners who are on the panel here today, PracticeWeb and Proten Sales Development. Applications will shortly be open to any firm that is a WhisperClaims trial customer or a subscriber by the deadline date, which is the 23rd of April 2021. We are looking for firms who demonstrate the most impressive yet realistic and well-grounded growth plans for their R&D tax service in the 2021-2022 financial year, and the schedule that you can see in front of you is what's up for grabs, basically. So more of that will be revealed within the next few days. I think that's everything for now. Is there anything else anyone wants to say? Are you all good? Yeah. Yep. No. Okay. Brilliant. So on that note,
just before you close, just to let everyone know on the call, this is the first time that Suze has done this. So well done, Suze, for being a great host. Thanks for doing that for us.
Thank you, Mike. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Mike. On that note, we'll draw the session today to a close. So thank you so much for everyone who's joined us today. If anyone does have any questions that they didn't get a chance to answer, please just get in touch, and we'll be very happy to answer them out with the webinar today. We will be sending out an email within the next few days with a link to the live recording, and also addressing any of the questions that have been asked in writing, and also a link to the masterclass competition. As Mike mentioned earlier on, we have another webinar coming up next month on the 25th of March, which is specifically addressing eligibility. So look out for that too. And that's us for today. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully speak to you.
Suze, just a real quickie, Suze. There's a couple of extra questions come through at the end. So Sharon, drop me a note on my website, which I think is in the chat box. I'm more than happy to talk to you. And Tax Connect, I think, again, if you want to talk, just get in touch.
Yeah. I think Tax Connect's question is a really good one.
Yeah.
Well, we've still got a few people online, so do you want to just address it just now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go on, yeah.
Yep. So is it the Tax Connect one?
Well, yeah, that's just it kind of, I mean, both of them are interesting, but I suppose the Tax Connect one was quite interesting because actually Mike and I, when we did our webinar a little while back, that's an area that we talked about as well, which was, so that Tax Connect one is saying as an accountant, if we would like to compete with competitors who provide with only R&D services, then from a client perspective, where would we stand? How can we, the accountants, position ourselves in the R&D market? And that's a really strong, I think it's a great question. And I suppose the sort of position that Mike and I spoke about and talked about in the last webinar that we had on this front is where we see that a great opportunity is that the accountant, the client from an accounting perspective and a numbers perspective, and the advice and how ingrained you are in perhaps their business, it does help them spot those opportunities that perhaps an R&D service wouldn't. And I suppose you can sell that in as well on an ongoing basis of spotting those opportunities, as well as I've got many people who I know who own businesses who ask their accountant a lot about R&D services. What can I do to be more efficient and effective, and then what can I do to get some money back, basically. So they're in a prime position to spot those opportunities over and above an R&D company who all they do is R&D, and they have to get to know their business, they have to go into it, they need to really understand it, but you already know it and you already get the challenges and issues from a complete business perspective, not just an R&D one.
Just to add to that really quickly, Mike, there's an important point in terms of, if we're talking there about existing customers, so it's an accountant with existing customers, then remember that the accountant are already a trusted advisor, and I've got a relationship with that customer that actually is something to really play to. Clearly a third party walking through the door doesn't have that relationship. So there's a sort of soft aspect to that needs to be exploited, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
Suze, do you want me to just pick up on Sharon's question briefly as well while we're here? So Sharon, if you're still on.
We've still got 40 odd people on the call. So
I can see. No, it's good. It's good. So so Sharon said, in talking to journeys, I've created an infographic roadmap detailing all our services. It creates a good talking point for starters. Just looking at the best ways to push this out, what would you suggest? I think it's a great thing to do. What I would say though, and without seeing it, it's difficult to comment. But the thing to remember with your services, the services in themselves are not what's important. What's important is that the value that the client gets from having your services delivered. So for things like infographics, they're great. The services are sitting on the periphery. What you really need to be focusing on are, what are the particular problems or challenges that you're helping your clients address? And the way that you help them is with the services. So make sure that you focus everything around the value that you're delivering, not what you're doing. But yeah, again, Sharon, if you want me to take a look at it or have a chat, please get in touch.
Brilliant. I think we're done, aren't we, on all the questions there, Suze?
Yeah, that's everyone. That's fantastic. Thank you everyone so much. That's great.
Brilliant.
Well, we've got one more, but we've still got 43 people.
Go on, I'm happy to stay on. I'm happy to stay on.
Oh, sorry, actually, thank you, Naresh. It was just asking for our contact details. So what I can do is anyone who's still around, I can pop the details up in the chat in a moment for you all, if that's okay. And we'll obviously add them to the follow-up email as well.
Great, that's great. Thanks, Suze. Thanks for your efforts.
Thank you, everyone. All right.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye now.